Well, welcome into another episode of StoryWorld. Steve Strand here, my boy Al. What's up, bro?
I'm doing well. Your shirt is making me hungry though.
Yeah, man. Got my wine hamburger shirt on. Pretty exciting. If you know, you know. If you don't know, sorry, you can't know.
I'm excited for tonight, Steve. Mostly because I don't know where this parable that we're talking about is going to take us.
Yes, it's like a fun adventure every time we do this, right? It's so exciting.
Yeah, so tonight we're talking about the wheat and the weeds, which I kind of mentioned to Steve beforehand. It sounds like a classic book that one might read in high school. The wheat and the weeds.
It does. It
Yeah,
does. Like almost like the catcher in the rye, but it's
yeah,
not.
and
It's
the
the
wind in
wheat
the
and
willows.
the weeds. Yes, this is the biblical parable of the wheat and the weeds. If we didn't mention, we're continuing on our parables series. And this was in Matthew 13, verses 24 through 30, through 43.
Yeah, what's interesting, just reading it, so it's Matthew 13, 24 to 43, but in between is actually the mustard seed parable that Steve and I covered a couple sessions ago. And it's funny because so Jesus is saying all these parables. He talks about the wheat and the weeds. Then he goes right on to the mustard seed one. And then the disciples like ask him to go back. They say, wait a second, can you go back to the wheat and the weeds? We actually like want to know what this means. So it's kind of interesting that
Yeah.
even the disciples really kind of wanted to hone in on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, and probably no surprise too, because also right nestled in this parable, specifically starting at verse 34, and actually just it's verse 34 and 35. He goes into why he tells parables as well, and so which we're going to get into that in a completely separate episode because I think it's kind of worthy to kind of talk about on its own. Like, why did Jesus actually tell parables? It might not be why you think. Anyway, no doubt that was sort of intriguing to the disciples, and so they wanted to know, hey, like, well, what's up with this parable that you told earlier about the wheat and the weeds? So, and I think it's really interesting. So, do you want to read the description of the parable?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. So in the parable, The Wheat and the Weeds, Jesus tells the story of a farmer who sows good wheat seeds in his field. While everyone is asleep, an enemy comes and sows weeds among the wheat. As the plants grow, the servants notice the weeds and ask if they should pull them out. The farmer tells them to wait until the harvest so that they don't accidentally uproot the wheat. At harvest time, the reapers will gather the weeds first and burn them, then gather the wheat into the barn. Yeah, that tells the story, and I guess we can go into the meaning of it afterward. But that's the actual parable content of it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's right. So, you kind of mentioned it was funny, right? Like this image of like this little, the enemy going in and like sneaking among the wheat outside in the middle of the night, like just sowing their weeds. I thought that was kind of a funny little image.
Seems like a random thing to want to destroy on someone's field rather than dig up the crops or burn down a barn. They're just gonna throw bad seed in with the good.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, no surprise why this parable was used, just in the sense of, again, agrarian culture. Like, we notice a lot of these parables, like the vast majority of them are agricultural in nature. It's just something that they would understand. Again, historically, this is not, it's not controversial. It's definitely not like, this is just the tools that they had to work with around them. I'm sure if we were telling parables today, we would talk about, people going to Mars and whatever, but this was not then. Or then was not now, whatever. And so, yeah, they use the tools that were available, around them to help them understand in some cases. And, for some people that actually was a little confusing, but yeah, anyway, that was like kind of what was up here. And so the disciples kind of wanted to know what he was trying to say. So, right. The point is that there is wheat and weeds scattered together, right? This is what the circumstance kind of brought, was that they were together. And the point that Jesus made was that at harvest time, like, or if you were to wait, if you didn't wait until the harvest to where like you saw clearly what was wheat and clearly what was weed, then you might end up pulling out wheat when you pulled up weed as well. And I honestly think if you're ready to read the next section, this kind of segues nicely right into um, the interpretation of the parable, what it means, and I think it's actually very, very powerful.
Yeah. So, when Jesus explains to the disciples what it means, generally speaking, it's the good sower who sows the wheat is the Son of Man, is Jesus, and then the who's sowing the bad seed is, I forget exactly how he says it, but basically wicked men, people who follow the devil, who are
Yeah,
who are not saved. Um, and I mean, that's kind of like the main point of it. And Steve and I were talking about different routes that we could go down with this parable, because there are a lot to explain. But the one thing that he had brought up that I think is a good route to take is there's a couple things to recognize. The first thing I think is that um, Jesus explicitly states here that there's always going to be good and evil, and until the end of days. And you can interpret this scripture however you want, when the end of days is, how it's going to happen, when it's all going to go down. But until that time, there's always going to be bad and there's always going to be good. And I think that's important to remember, because a lot of times um, we either get discouraged with all the evil that we see around us, or we kind of even maybe shake in our faith a little bit, like wondering why there is so much evil. If there is a God, it just doesn't seem to make sense. But just take comfort in knowing that Jesus tells them there is going to be good and there is going to be evil, and this is kind of just how it is right now.
yeah. It's not like there's a really interesting point. Like there are a couple versions of historically what has been called the problem of evil. There is, and I think sort of the easiest way to think about it is you've got sort of this logical problem of evil, which I think it's fair to say most philosophers, at least most Christian philosophers, are pretty satisfied the logical problem of evil is sort of dead in the water, for the simple reason that you can't ever be in a position to know what a being like God would do in any given situation. Like he could always have morally sufficient reasons for seemingly incomprehensible evil, right? So you've got this logical problem of evil, then you've got this emotional problem of evil, which is really powerful from the standpoint of just the suffering that it causes you when you're going through something that seems evil and like things that just happen. Like, why your home might be invaded, or why a loved one might die before the time is theirs. And so there's obviously this sort of emotional problem of evil that can affect the way that people think. And then there's sort of a third one that I think aspects of it could fit into the other two, but it's important enough and it gets talked about as a separate problem that I think it should be sort of considered separately. And that is what some people call the problem of gratuitous evil and suffering, which is basically the idea that there seems to be some suffering in life that just happens that is like utterly pointless, right? It's like it doesn't appear that there's anything good that can come out of a particular situation. Like it just seems like totally pointless suffering. And again, each of these arguments, if you were to like run the actual arguments and you were to evaluate them, they have strengths, they have weaknesses. Certainly some are more emotionally difficult than others. I do find myself squarely in the camp that the logical problem of evil is not a problem. But beyond all of those things, I think one of the most interesting things is that you would find many who'd say that actually evil is not evidence against Christianity. Evil is evidence for Christianity, because the Christian story deals with evil. It has an explanation for the origin of evil. It has the assumption all throughout that evil and suffering are going to be part of our daily experience. And again, why all that is the case. But not only does it have an explanation for it and the assumption of it, but it also has an answer for it, a consistent throughout the scriptures, a consistent answer for the fact that one day there will be the alleviation of all evil and suffering in the world by God. And that is what this is getting to. This is getting to the fact that, among other things, come the end of times, come the end days, there is going to be judgment. There's going to be an answer. All evil is going to be wiped away. And again, it's just it's all part of this. It's all part of the package. In the world that we live in, we understand that there is evil. I mean, this is the Story World podcast, right? How many like what percentage? 90+% of stories are about the battle of the hero overcoming some form of evil. Like even like in most stories, you have some sort of a savior complex type thing going on. And it's like, why? It's because we need a savior. We need somebody to save us from the evil. And we all know that it's here. And so this is just another one of those reasons why I think the Christian story is just honestly the story of reality. It just mirrors reality in such a way that it just seems like reality, and the whole world of story that we find points back into this. And so this is the point that's being illustrated so nicely by this parable.
Yeah, I agree. And even though it's not explicitly stated by Jesus here, it's kind of implied where Jesus is telling us to he's not telling us to rush. He's not telling us to, quick and try to whatever you want to call it, to destroy the evil, or it's not our job in the end. It's God's job. And he says the crops are going to grow. I'll determine, we can see who the good is, who the bad is. And, he says that angels will take care of the chafing of or the chaffing, however you pronounce it, of the weeds. And, and he'll bring in the good crop. And so it's almost like he's kind of explaining this in a very like calm way, not with an urgency to it, and which kind of should bring, I guess, a little bit of, peace to mind. Just to kind of, when you feel overwhelmed with everything going on in the world and not knowing how it's all going to pan out, and you saw like your neighbor doing this, and like this family member is into that, or heck, even like you're dealing with stuff that kind of slow down and maybe remember this passage as a reminder that God has it all worked out, and this is just part of the plan, that it's all just going to have to grow into fruition.
Yeah, and again, this is just something that I love. Like in this parable, you have a really great explanation for like why it's not our job to root out the evil. Like all we can do as Christians is point people to the Savior, right? Is point people to the one who will, because here's the thing. We don't have the perspective. And this, I just love when like people point out a problem, say with Christianity, but then it's like, no, there are answers to that problem. And it's like, oh, you're just making that up. Well, no, like it's actually consistent with biblical teaching. If you look at what the Bible's actually saying. Here we find like this really concise, amazing explanation that we don't have in our finite minds. We don't have the perspective to be able to go out and uproot the weeds, because we might uproot some wheat with it. And there are two possibilities, right? You might have somebody who looks like weeds to you, and maybe by all indications they are weeds, but God has a plan for them. And before the end of time, they're going to be a piece of wheat. Okay. But then you've got others that you're looking around, and it's like they look like wheat. And I can unfortunately name many, many people who we've seen this way, right? You look at them and you're like, they're wheat if anybody is. And then what you find out along the way is they were actually weeds. And we can't have that kind of perspective. We don't know that. And so we can't be responsible for eradicating evil. And that's not to say we don't get involved in politics. That's not to say that we don't try to minimize evil that's done and like try to outweigh, try to put as much good into the earth as possible. I mean, I think that's all part of our duty as a Christian, but ultimately it's not our job to get rid of evil. It's our job to point people to the only person who can get rid of evil, because he's the only one with the long perspective. He's the only one who really knows what this world needs and who is who. And, again, this story just internally demonstrates the tight logic that Christianity has about the way that evil should be handled.
I remember growing up, my pastor would say that when we get to heaven, we'll be saying, "What are you doing here?" and "Where's so and so?" Because in the end, we really you just don't know. The only thing you should know about it is you, and that's why kind of a related verse in a way is one of my favorite verses is when the disciples see someone. I think he's actually casting out demons, but like he's not he's not part of the group, and they kind of are putting him down. And Jesus says, "Well, what are you talking about? Like he's, you're either for me or against me. And this man's casting out demons in my name. I forget specifically what he was doing, but
Yep.
and so
Yep. You're right.
I think we tend to be not just judgy in general, but judgy about someone's salvation and whether or not they're actually true followers of Christ or not. And there are certain Bible verses that talk about like we can see fruit from people and everything, but in the end, the only person that about is yourself and your relationship with God.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. That's 100% true. I mean, I really don't have anything to add to that. I think you did a great job there. I mean, that's exactly right. And the Bible again, like that verse that you mentioned, right? It's all like all this stuff has been handled. That's what's so, that's what's so interesting to me. Just, I want to make the general point, right? That when you look at a worldview, right? When you're trying to evaluate something at the worldview level, really what you want to do is look for internal consistencies and or inconsistencies, right? Because it's when you don't have an inaccurate worldview is not going to be able to accurately answer some very important questions, right? Case in point, I've explained this on the podcast before, but I'll just give you the brief version. Case in point, naturalism, right? The view that there is no God, there is no spiritual realm at all. It's meat all the way down, as they say, right? Evolutionary, blah, blah, blah. Abiogenesis happened in the beginning. Somehow the world came from somewhere. We don't know where. Life came from somewhere. We don't know where, but we're here in evolution and blah, 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 blah. The problem is that there's no, number one, the Darwinian mechanisms that they say produced all of this change have been demonstrably shown to be unable to produce the level of change that we actually see. So let's just take that and just set it in our box over to the side. Okay. We know that there's more to the story than the general theory of evolution, of Darwinism as it's conceived, because we know it doesn't work. Okay. But let's set that off to the side. Let's say it does work. If it does work, okay, it's still, there's no guarantee that it selects for truth. It selects for survival value. And so we can't have confidence that what we actually think and believe is true. We can only have confidence that what we think and believe will help us survive another day, right? Now, we obviously do feel like that we can come to the truth about things, right? The problem is not whether or not we can come to truth. We know we can come to truth. Okay. We can look at something and say, that's red objectively, like that's red, or that's a blade of grass, right? Like these are objective things. Of course, some people subjectively experience things differently, like a colorblind person, for example, but still, like objectively, when you see all the, again, it's red or it's a blade of grass, whatever. Okay. We can know that. So the question is, why can we know that? Now, it doesn't make sense that we can know that if the only thing that we have is a worldview that does not inherently select for truth, right? That there's no inherent survival value to knowing the truth of the situation. Okay. But if we have a different worldview, like a Christian worldview, for example, where the creator, is literally a mind that is not a body, right? Literally just a mind who creates other minds. And like this is a particular mind who by his own admission cannot lie. Then like we know that we have an obligation, literally a moral obligation to be truthful. And so it makes sense that in everything that we do, we can think truthfully. I know that was a really long explanation, but the point I wanted to make there is that there's a consistent internal logic to everything we see when we actually read the biblical storyline. Now, are there questions here and there? Of course, there's little, nagging things, and it's like, well, this might be a little confusing, or this might be a little confusing. But like, again, by all indications, we have a internally consistent worldview, and most other worldviews are just not internally consistent. And in fact, they fall apart pretty quickly. And I think that's something that gives Christianity a huge feather in its cap. And this is just one great example of how Christianity deals with the problem of evil in a way that no other worldview can. Naturalism can neither explain the existence of evil, nor does it have an answer for the existence of evil. It's a non-starter. It goes nowhere. And we have all of that and more. So it's really powerful stuff.
I feel like that we should start a second podcast called StoryWorld Podcast Revamped Apologetics or something like that. and just go that route. I know. obviously,
It's fun.
yeah, I agree. And all this is kind of wrapped up in just like a small amount of what Jesus is saying here. And I think it'd be fun to explore too sometime. Um, the kind of like the savior complex and like really digging into
Hmm.
the story of Jesus dying on the cross and what that really means and how significant that is. And then look at how that's influenced every story that, you know, breaks it, that almost every story that's told. And, I mean, that's beneficial too
Yeah.
from both a writing perspective of how do you make a good hero, and then also just looking at the importance of Jesus as savior. But yeah, I think that's all I have. We could have gone the route of looking at the end times in this and go into Revelation and making some nifty predictions. But I think that the route that we chose was worked out quite well.
We definitely took a safer route than that one and shorter, I would say. So,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have a I have a
absolutely.
lot of thoughts of my own still to work out on end times and Revelation and all of that. I know how I want it to go, but I'm not so sure it's going to go that way. So anyway, it's
Yep.
there's a lot to unpack there, especially coming out of a very fundamental Baptist
Mhm.
worldview that I grew up in, and I'm sure I know you had some of that as well.
Yep.
And so anyway, it's things may not always be as they appear. Anyway, so thoughts and thoughts there.
Yeah, so that brings us to our story of the week. And this week, Steve and I share the same story of the week, and that is the
Yes.
Sugar Show. So, Steve, you want to tell us about the fight that happened on Saturday?
First. Oh man. So yeah, we are recording this the Tuesday after the Saturday where it was UFC
Past
292.
11, but before.
And anyway, so Sean O'Malley won the bantamweight world title over Aljamain Sterling in the um, first minute or so of round number two.
How'd you
Round number
feel
two.
about, I forget who was reffing, but how'd you feel about him stopping the fight when he did? I know that was kind of a small point of contention.
Yeah, well, that's always a point of contention, especially with some judges. So Mark Goddard was the excuse me refs. Mark Goddard was the referee. I have a couple things on this, right? So number one, Mark is like as professional as it
Hmm.
gets. He
Yeah.
is a fighter. He trains other judges. I mean, this is a dude with pedigree, right? He is a
Yep.
ardent. I mean, he is a professional, right? He is really good at what he does. Okay. Um, there are some fighters who have beef with him because of other things that happened to them in their past. Like again, imagine you think you get robbed one time by this rep. You are just always going to have problems with him, right? And that's kind of what's happened with people. Amazingly, the only person who has yet to question the call that the ref made was Aljamain Sterling, the person
Yeah.
who got caught. He
Yep.
he completely respected the decision from the get go. And even the first words out of his mouth when Joe Rogan went to interview him were, he was a lot better than I thought. He immediately gave the credit to Sean for what he did. And if you just watched it, and I've seen lots of people's comments on YouTube and Twitter and all of that. And I actually think that despite there being a little bit of controversy about that, most people are on the same page that Aljo was given plenty of time to recover.
Yes.
And those hammer fists are,
He got in a lot too.
Right.
He got in a dozen or so.
yes.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
A bunch of very, very hard hits.
Not just a
Aljo
hammer fist,
was
but
busted.
one from Sugar, who like that's what he does.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like that is his MO. If you watch his fights, his MO is that out of nowhere, just come with a screaming punch that knocks you on the floor, hesitate for a minute, and then go seal the deal with some hammer fist just to make sure. And usually that's the first hammer fist that they block it out on. And he let him go 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. I mean, he
Yeah.
gave them plenty of opportunity knowing what he was capable of.
I actually thought that guy
and
was going to call
what?
it after the first 2 or 3 hits, just because he was
I thought so too.
defenseless there, and so when he kept it going, I was pretty surprised. And then, like,
Mhm.
yeah, he let quite a few blows go. So even though Aljamain was kind of
Yeah.
getting, trying to flip himself as round, yeah, I it's kind of hard to argue with the call.
Yep, it is. I'll admit my first thought, because I saw him like starting to scramble back up right as he made the call, my very first thought was, that felt a little early. But then I thought about it for like 3 seconds and I was like, no, I really think that was right. And the more I saw the replay, the more I became convinced that it was a great call. And there's this one guy, I don't know, don't quote me. It might be Marab, Dwalishvili or whatever. I'm not sure exactly how you say his name. It's pretty crazy. He's been one of the most like outspoken, one of the most vocal critics of this move and of Mark Goddard in general, because he's got past beef with him. And he made this comment about like, oh, we train, we didn't do that. Like, we go to die in there. Just let us go. Like, basically let us fight. Let us die in there until we just can't go anymore. And I think this is actually a point that I've seen Mark Goddard make on Twitter before, the referee. And I think it's pertinent here too. It's not just the referee's job to like wait till the fighter's incapacitated or to like do whatever. The fighter's safety is actually his number one job, right? Making sure they follow the rules, of course, but it's actually also very important. Like, I've heard Dana White say that you'd be surprised that even though as injured as people sometimes get, he said, compared to other sports, he's like, it's actually probably one of the safest sports, because there's like literally like a quick, the process is so dialed in for what you do in whatever situation. Like, people go to the hospital right after fights to make sure they're okay. They are on immediate, if they get any kind of like cut, injury or whatever like that, it's like they're on immediate leave for like 6 months. They can't even come back for 6 months. Like, there is a lot that goes into it. And it is Mark Goddard's job and any referee's job to make sure that that person does not get hurt beyond what is reasonable. And so he was literally watching Aldo just keep taking these blows. And he's like, okay, that I've seen enough. That's enough.
Yeah. And even if you could have taken a dozen or 2 dozen more, I mean, these guys are like, they're the peak specimen of what someone who is determined in their career and what they want to do. So that they're going to push it as hard as they can. And that's for everything, whether that's in Steve's business side of you, if you're a runner, if no matter what you do, if you're someone with that hard mentality, you might push yourself and get burnt out. Or in this situation, if they just let the fights go until someone completely gives out, it could kill someone. So yeah, I mean, definitely the ref is there for their safety for sure.
Yeah. And it's not a question in my mind whether Aldo could have kept fighting. I'm sure that he could have kept fighting, but at that moment, enough had been done. Like, that's the thing you got to realize with this stuff. Like, could he have kept fighting? Yes. But in that moment, enough had been done to show that he was dominant in that performance. And even Aldo recognized it. So it's like, what do you do with that? I mean, you kind of got to go where they went, and he deserved. I mean, he did a fantastic job. And I think most people understand. Most people are on the right side of this. So it was a great fight. And if you're not a UFC fan, what are you doing? Oh my gosh, you have got to get in on this.
And I definitely enjoyed the sportsmanship between them at the end. Usually at the end, no matter what kind of smack talking is leading up to the fight, usually there's like some congratulations at the end or something. But these two guys look like they really got good respect for each other and really face each other in the ring, with a mutual respect. So that was really good to see.
Yeah. Oh, I was actually shocked to see it, because there was a ton of like, the back and forth, blah for months leading up to this fight. And I know some of that is optics and some of that is serious. And, but I mean, I think they very seriously had, but once Aljo was humbled in the situation and just saw firsthand what Sean was really capable of, I think that was it. And what's fascinating? His first performance, which was a breakout performance on the Dana White Contender Series, was 2017. I mean, he's been at this for 6 years. Like, you kind of think it's quick. Yeah. He's been at this for 6 years.
A long time. Yep.
And dominant performance after dominant performance. Literally,
I think I
watched some of the highlights.
I think he's had one loss.
One loss. And just knocking people out, and not just knocking them out. I mean, every time. every time with style. I mean, with serious swagger. Like, it's not just any normal fight.
He's the
He's
real
got a particular thing and he owns at drawing you into a shot, knocking you down, and just pounding the crap out of you if it's necessary. Sometimes the knockout just takes care of it. But he's a scrawny little dude. You wouldn't expect it, but boom, done.
I like that he has the
sorry,
he's got like the showmanship of
Go ahead.
McGregor without like the cockiness associated with it. Like, he's cocky to the point where
and
you
he's
want
got-
him to be.
he's got some cockiness.
Yeah, but he's got like an appropriate level. But like when it comes down to it, like in all his interviews, he really just says like, I'm gonna go out there and fight my best, and I think he just really, I think he's, even though that comes out, it's just a natural part of the sport. I think he actually is pretty humble about like where he's come from. Like what you said, he's been in it for so long. I think he realizes, realizes all of that.
Yeah, and I think he's one of those who is grateful for combat sports because of what it gave him. Again, he was another one of those guys, which is another one I want to talk about in just a minute, but he was another one of those guys who, like, the sport gave him something that was absent, and missing for him. And that's powerful, right? When you're that devoted to it, not because it's just a fun thing to do or whatever, but like when it literally gave you something in your life that you were missing. And so that sort of leads me to like the next headline fight for me is going to be Adesanya versus Sean Strickland. Have you followed Sean Strickland at all?
I mean, no, anything recently that I've seen come up or anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like it kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, not that he came totally out of nowhere, but like I'm actually kind of shocked. Like, I'm not sure exactly what ranking he is right now.
I'm not sure.
Sean Strickland rank, is it number 5 or something? He is number 8, right? So this is how good this guy is. If this is accurate, if this is up to date, age 32, current ranking, check this out. His current ranking is number 8, and he's got a title shot with Adesanya.
Pretty wild
for the middleweight fight. Number 8. That's crazy. And the thing is, boy, I mean, he straight up deserves it. And the last time that he went out there, so he's got this crazy style where like it's super unconventional. And I'll be honest, I don't know. I mean, everyone else that I've seen fight Izzy. Okay, I know Izzy is a he's sort of shocking in the sense that like he doesn't look like the rest of those guys. He doesn't look like a middleweight, right? He looks a little scrawnier. You wouldn't think that he's been like this dominant world champion, and yet he is. But all the other fighters that I've seen him fight are frankly a little generic, right? Like, and that's okay. Like, again, they're all good, of course, but like they're generic. So Strickland is not generic. In fact, he's very unconventional, and that's like his whole thing. And he also has this like epic, couldn't care less, don't give a crap sort of attitude. And his style is just so crazy. Like, it's going to be like the last style bender against a serious style bender. Like, I don't know what to expect from this fight other than it's going to be stinking awesome. It's just going to be so great.
You're right, though. Every time someone gets up against Izzy, they just look so much bigger. And I think Izzy's going to get demolished, but he does.
Yeah. Yep. No, but he does it. He pulls it out. So I'm just really bummed to see the Strickland versus Adesanya fight. I don't know what's going to come in that one.
It's been a while since we watched the fight together. Maybe we'll have to come together for that one.
It has. It would be a good. It would be a good one.
We get a nice meat platter going on, and
bro. Yes, let's do it. And I'm already there.
All right, Steve. It has been a good podcast. I think we got 3 or 4 more parables left. I'm looking forwd to couple of the final ones. It's gonna be good discussion.
Yeah, no, I'm loving going through these parables. I'm actually getting a lot from this. I'm learning as we're going through them. I'm like thinking about parables in a new and different way. So it's just been a fun series for me. Right? It's good to learn.
I'm getting a lot more
learn as we teach.
I thought. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Steve.
Yeah. Same here. All right. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much. Like this video, share this video, tell your friends, hide your kids, hide your wife. And we'll see you guys in the next one.
See y'all.